I'll call this regular council meeting of the Village of Grand Manan to order. It's 7:30 p.m. and with us for prayer this evening is Sherry Linton from Lighthouse Church.
Good evening, everyone. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for another gorgeous day on Grand Manan. And I just thank you for these men and women sitting in front of me this evening, Lord. Leadership is not always an easy thing, and sometimes it's not always a fun thing. But these men and women are called to this job. They're called to make the tough choices and have those not fun moments in leadership, Lord. And I'm so thankful for each of them that they're willing to step in and serve in this way and serve our beautiful island. And so, Lord, as they have this meeting this evening, as they talk about different things that are happening on Grand Manan and plan for different things, Lord, I just pray that you lead them and you guide them, you give them the right answers where they need it, and you give them peace in difficult decisions. And so, Lord, be in this room this evening as they conduct this meeting. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things for opening remarks tonight. First of all, I want to start off by congratulating Ian Lee and Susan Holt on the recent provincial election. Ian's our new MLA, and Susan Holt was sworn as the first female premier of the province of New Brunswick on Saturday. So it was a pretty exciting event, and we look forward to working with both of them in the years to come. This is an update on something we've been following for most of the year, and that's the NB Power generating station down in Ingalls Head. There was a report that came out at the end of last year as part of the New Brunswick Energy Strategy that it was going to be decommissioned and or replaced. NB Power understands our concerns with the necessity of having it here not only for power generation, but more importantly as a public safety thing should there be an extended power outage. They have done an assessment of the station. It is good till 2030. We will have a follow-up call in 6 months. We're just keeping those on the calendar, but we've got a little bit of time more than what we thought we did back in the winter. So just so everybody knows, it's still on the radar. It's just not moving quickly, which is not a bad thing for us. Next thing, it's November, which on Grand Manan means the opening of lobster season. It's a very stressful time for everybody in the weeks leading up to it, and probably more so this year with the presence of right whales. So we wish everybody a safe and prosperous season, and hopefully the season will open relatively on time next week. And finally, just a reminder that a week from today is Remembrance Day. The ceremony will be at 10:45 down at the Cenotaph by the fire hall. They've been doing the ceremony outside the last few years, and it's kind of nice being outside while they do it. So hopefully if you're around next Monday, you'll have a chance to stop in down there. And with that, that's what I had for opening remarks. The next up is disclosure of conflict of interest. I have to declare on 17-1. Are there any other declarations of conflict of interest? What? If you're going to declare, this is where you declare, yeah. 19-2, okay. Anyone else? Hearing none, before we leave this one, the deputy mayor isn't here, and he'd normally assume the chair when I leave on 17-1. So I'd look for a nomination for someone to chair the meeting for that part of the agenda if someone would like to move and second a volunteer to be sitting in the hot seat. Heard the motion from Councillor Greenlaw. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Toll. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Dan, you're up. Next up is adoption of the minutes. We had the regular council meeting minutes from October 7th, as well as a special meeting on October the 28th, and those were circulated in the package. You heard the motion from Councillor Boyd. Do we have a seconder? Second. Seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Additions to the agenda. I have a post-it for transfers, which would be under 17.3, I think, they're accepted. The first is to transfer 18.3, sorry. Is to transfer $230,918.79 from the general operating fund to the general capital fund. And the second would be to transfer $238,603.47 from the general capital fund to the airport line of credit.
Say that number again.
238,603.47. Could I have a motion to make those two additions? Heard the motion from Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Boyd. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next up is the RCMP, but they aren't here this evening, so that moves us down to the 10-minute open session. And I will keep moving on because I don't see anybody jumping out for that. And that takes us to 13.1, which is correspondence. There's a letter from the Grand Manan Development Association that they would like read. And so it's to the Village of Grand Manan, Mayor and Council. The Grand Manan Curling Club is undergoing repairs to the ice-making equipment. The estimate we have received for parts and labor is $12,125 before taxes, copy attached. We have also incurred an expense for testing of the equipment at about $5,000. We haven't received that invoice yet. We are asking for financial assistance to help with these repairs. Any amount would be appreciated. Curling is a sport that can be enjoyed by young and old and has been part of the community since 1967. We would like to be able to offer the experience for years to come. Without these repairs, we will have to close the curling rink part of the Grand Manan Development Association. Thank you for your consideration to our request. Michael O'Neill, President. Any comments on that? Councillor Boyd?
Is this something that we can look into in our budgeting process? I mean, I know we can do a $200 donation if they fill out a form, but that would just kind of be scratching the surface of what they're looking at spending here.
That was going to be my suggestion, given we're already in November and well into budget process. I think it would make sense to look at it at that point if that's the wishes of the group.
Do we need a motion for that, or?
Councillor Green?
Are we talking of putting it in next year's budget or seeing if we have some monies left in this year's budget where we can transfer the funds?
I was thinking next year's budget, but if we have some in this year's budget, I guess would maybe be the best. I don't know how quick are they looking for it immediately or just whenever, or how much whenever?
I haven't talked to them. I don't know if anybody else has had a conversation with them.
I think they're looking for, I think it's their compressor, isn't it? And, I mean, if they're gonna open, they'll need to have that fixed for the season, so I would think relatively soon, so.
With the property tax assessments out the end of last week, we should be in a place where we can rejuvenate the budget process, for lack of a better word for it. So maybe we can look at it over the course of this month and maybe have an answer back to them for the early part of December, if that makes sense, or at least a recommendation. Is that, maybe not as fast as they want, but I think it's probably, as you said, more realistic than the $200 we could do otherwise. Okay? All right, so we will talk about that over our budget process and hopefully come back with something for December. Okay. New business, council chamber, old equipment, CAO Chris Rayner to discuss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is basically some housekeeping. When we got these new tables for the council room, we took the old ones, which were those 3/4 inch pieces of oak plywood that made the tables, up to the Doctor's Barn, and we kind of agreed to keep them for a bit to make sure that we were okay with the new setup before we scrap them or put them out for proposal for someone that may want them for something. So I guess we're at the time where it's time to do something with them. They're taking up a lot of room at the Doctor's Barn. I know when the Legion was up there to get their banners, it's quite congested. So it'd be nice to finally do something with them to relieve some of the congestion up in the barn.
Councillor Green?
I would move that we declare those old tables surplus village equipment to be disposed of.
You heard the motion from Councillor Green. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Boyd. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. 14.2 is the 2023 financial statements. Looking for approval. Treasurer Calder?
Sylvie came down and went over those with us, and we just forgot to put them on our October meeting to approve, and we just need a motion to approve our financial statements, so we can give it to Beers Neal, so we can get our final copy.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the financial statements?
I will make that motion.
You heard the motion from Councillor Toll. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Layton. Question? Councillor Green?
When we went through it, there were a few issues that had to be clarified. Did they get rectified to your satisfaction?
I think so. We had a meeting with Bonnie about some of the transfer station situations, and gotten back to Sophie. She gave us a list of recommendations to do, and we've implemented them all. But yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because at one point it looked like someone was getting a very big salary when it was actually
Yeah,
several.
she's
but-
putting that, she's reprinting those, yes.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. 14.3 is housing grants. Xander Gopin from the Southwestern Brunswick Service Commission is here to talk about that.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think this is actually my first time officially being at Grand Manan Council. I've met most of you before, and I've been here and there, but first time officially being at Council. I wish I had an awesome update on the Housing Accelerator Fund. The only update I have is I have run into some of the CMHC folks at a conference last week, and they said they're hoping to have answers out by the fall. There was some communication with the underwriters on some applications for other municipalities that were far more complicated than Grand Manan's due to boundary changes. So Grand Manan, nothing changed with local governance reform. So data-wise, it was straightforward. So I'm not surprised to have not heard anything specifically there. But I know they're with the underwriters. So fingers crossed on those federal funds. I do know that the province, through the Regional Development Corporation, has a fair amount of money they're looking to spend by the end of March. And that money can be used for pre-construction studies or capital for projects that are kind of already in works, and it's specifically for infrastructure. I have looked into this with Grand Manan specifically because obviously there's the challenges of not having the public sewer and water system, and I'm pretty sure that RDC would provide funding, obviously for any type of road infrastructure, but also probably for septics, engineered septics if those were needed for a project. So I think there were some discussions, I can't remember how long ago, but the CAO and the mayor and myself, maybe some other folks, we met with Housing New Brunswick, which is the kind of provincial housing corporation, and they can help access provincial land. And there's a few sites that maybe have potential. And also the housing hub was there. There have been some personnel changes, but they can act as development support. So they can help with some of the applications, and their time would be paid for through the funding that you get. So I just want to remind everybody that those are out there, and I think you know, if you had a piece of land which you're like, well, the province owns this and we'd like to see what we can do there, then that's a really good candidate for the pre-construction studies. Those are pretty low bar to entry, and maybe you find out that, hey, there's a really good project here, and then you can get some of that capital funding. They are looking at prioritizing affordable housing projects. So that's there's not a whole lot on the horizon. I think everyone's just kind of hopeful for the Housing Accelerator Fund. Curious to see with a new provincial government if there'll be more different types of funding for things. So I'm keeping an eye on all of it. There is also the Federal Infrastructure Fund, which they're starting to release information on. So if there's, you know, that one I'm not nearly as sure because I haven't had the conversations with people yet, but part of my role as a housing specialist with the Service Commission is just kind of keep an eye on everything, and if I see opportunities, I'll bring them forward. And if there's any way that I can help with those, I'm here to help. So that's it really on the housing side of things. I'll be back up to talk about other stuff, but if there's questions on that, happy to answer.
Questions or comments?
Sandra, we never did hear back on that surplus property that DTI has, did we?
No, I don't remember where that got left.
No, there was 2 or 3 pieces that we identified
Yeah.
and inquired, but never ever did get an answer.
Okay, well, it might be good to follow up, especially now that there's a new government. I'll go back into my email and take a look. There also were those, that might have been right around when there were personnel changes at the housing hub. So Milan, who we met with, she's no longer there. So that, I don't know if that got wrapped up in it. So, but I'll double check on those.
Anyone else? You're off the hook for a couple minutes.
All right, I'll be back.
Okay. Sure I'm not skipping. 14.4 is tourism levy. This is something we've tossed around a little bit, but it really came up a couple weeks ago when we had a review of the Regional Service Commission budget, because one of the things that we are contributing towards is a regional tourism fund. And there are 2 other municipalities in the region that have a tourism levy, which is basically anytime you're in a hotel, if you look at your bill down on the bottom, a lot of times it will say marketing levy or some wording like that. It's just a percentage of the stay. That money can be used to offset some of those costs. It could also be used to offset the costs of our visitor information center that we're paying for as well. It's a way to raise a little bit of money to cover some of those expenses without having to pay for it through the property tax rate, which is something I think we're all very cognizant of. So I would like to suggest that we turn this over to the bylaw committee to have a go at it, and hopefully maybe we can get something in place before the summer season if it's the wishes of the group. So questions or comments on that? Councillor Turner.
I'm just thinking it may be good to discuss with, like, accommodations people, anybody involved in that business, just because they are stakeholders and it will increase their rates. So just as a courtesy, if nothing else, I think it should be brought to them.
I think that makes sense. I was on the Town of St. Andrews website over the weekend looking at how they have it set up in their registration, and it looks like a pretty straightforward process. I think it's something we should look at through ours, but I think it does make sense to sit down and talk to them about what some of the opportunities could be with that money as well once we get beyond the initial where we are, and if there is more than to cover those expenses, what are some of the opportunities and some of the things we can do locally with that?
Yeah, I think it can definitely be pitched as being in their best interest. I just think with their, you know, with the stakeholder role, it would be a good idea.
Councillor Green?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Do you know who that applies to? Do the Airbnbs, for example, are they in on this program?
Yeah, it can apply to any short-term rental, and looking at some of the other municipalities' bylaws, it's structured so it's for any rental less than 31 days, but it's campsites, Airbnb, Vrbo, you know, traditional cottages, hotels, that sort of thing. I mean, it depends on, of course, how we write the bylaw, but it can apply to all of them. So I'm not hearing any pushback, so I'm assuming we're okay with sending that to the bylaw committee, and we'll have a meeting with the accommodations people maybe once we get some structure up around it, then let's sit down and talk about what some of the logistics around that are. Okay. I'm up again for 14.5, which is a social media policy. I'd circulated a draft of that a couple months ago in email, and then it didn't make it to the next meeting agenda, so I'm bumping it up here. I didn't hear back from anybody. Are we okay with adopting that as a policy, or what are some thoughts, comments on that? Or would you like another month to think about it because you can't remember from when I circulated it back in September? Councillor Boyd?
I think it's good policy I think we should implement it as soon as possible, really. Yep.
Would you like to make a motion about that?
I will make a motion
Okay.
to that effect.
Heard the motion from Councillor Boyd. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. Question? Councillor Green?
Are you saying this policy that most of us scanned briefly on September, we're supposed to vote tonight to accept and adopt, or that we should proceed to, actually get serious about it and then adopt it?
I'm making a motion to adopt it.
Any other question? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded?
Nay.
Oh.
I don't remember seeing it.
Well, it's pretty straightforward from many municipalities. It was pretty well a copy and paste type thing. So it's basically covers our behinds and others' behinds on what you can and can't say as a councillor or through the village Facebook page, basically.
So I think if I heard the votes correctly, we're in a tie. Which was what my gasp was up here at the front of the table, for full disclosure. So I'm going to vote in favor of the motion. But if there's changes that are requested, it's a policy, not a bylaw, so it can easily be changed if you want to read it and make some suggestions to it. But in the interest of moving it forward, I think it's good if we implement it now. So, okay. That was a little stressful for me all of a sudden there. 14.6 is the Mill Hill right-of-way. Discussion, Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mill Hill, it's been a talk of conversation around the community for probably many years. There's always been a discrepancy with the right-of-way. The Village of Grand Manan, let me back up a little bit. From the intersection of the Whistle Road and Route 776, the first 720 feet is a 33-foot road. It's unknown, like after the 720 feet, you drive onto the Village of Grand Manan 66-foot right-of-way, which takes you up to the top of the hill. But the landowners in previous years couldn't agree to move forward with the right-of-way. So I've talked to each and every property owner here as of today, and everybody is on board with the village establishing a 66-foot right-of-way all the way up through there. In the event that funds come available down the road that we can actually pave the road, that's great, but I'm not asking about that. All I'd like to see is legal look into the unknown part of the property and make some recommendations of how we can move forward to bring this up to a 66-foot right-of-way from the corner of Route 776 and the Whistle Road to the top of the hill. I guess that's in a nutshell. So I'd like to did I make that motion? And all that? I'd like to make a motion that that staff reach out to legal counsel and look into the possibilities of establishing a right-of-way.
You heard the motion from Councillor Layton. Do we have a seconder? Okay. Hearing none, the motion will die. Counselor Turner?
I'm just not sure what we're doing, like, I don't understand the why, I guess.
Well, it's a very busy road. There's two businesses on it. One very busy fabricating business. I mean, there's lots of houses up there. There's room for development, but the right-of-way isn't there. The first part of the road, this isn't a right-of-way. It's unknown. Nobody knows who owns it. Then we drive on to the Village of Grand Manan, which is an established 66-foot right-of-way. And all I'd like to see us do is get legal to bring the first 720 feet up to a right-of-way. And that's it. It's just it's a task for the lawyer, I guess. I mean, eventually the roads will get paved, and I'd love to see that paved, but that's another conversation. I'd just like to see the right-of-way established for that road.
Anyone else?
It's time to move. Like, this has been an issue for 20 years or more, and the landowners, none of them would agree to give up any of their land. Now, everybody's willing to give up their land. It's just a legal process to go through, right? And it'll establish the right of way, which we don't have. We got one to the top of the hill, but not, it's a bottleneck. It'd be nice to get it sorted, I think. The people that live on that road really appreciate council moving ahead with it.
Counselor Boyd?
Yeah, I've had conversations with some of the landowners, and like you say, there's been a little bit of momentum in years past, but then there's always one or two that don't. I wonder maybe, Councilor Layton, if we could get in writing from all those landowners saying that they do agree, and then come back, say in the December meeting, and try it again? Is that a
I
possibility?
could entertain that. I've talked to them all personally, and some of them come to me and said, well, let's do this finally. But I mean, hey, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, doesn't have to be next week, but just like to move it forward. And if that's what you'd like to see,
Well, I mean,
I'm sure I can.
And then that way, we can take that to legal and say, listen, these are these PID owners, they all agree, how do we move forward to make this happen, sort of thing.
Okay.
Counselor Green?
Yeah, there are only 4 landowners that would be involved with giving up property.
Correct.
And Councillor Layton is right. There's been threats of violence if anyone tried to widen that road. Down at the mouth of the road, I thought it was a 1-rod right away, but maybe you said 30 feet. But regardless, whether it's 16 or 32 feet, doesn't matter a whole lot. But there's not a whole lot of land to give up there for anyone before it's, vital, like, really impacting their land. So I'd like to see how it could be drafted, I guess.
Anyone else? Counselor Turner?
Yeah, I think if we just had a statement, like something that each of them signed saying that they agree to this, I think it would be good to have it as a uniform type of thing, as opposed to me, one person saying, I'm okay with this, and another, I think it would be good for us to have something, and then in writing, because otherwise, if we were to go ahead, we've got nothing to fall back on if we, do something that is within that 66 feet, and somebody says, hey, I didn't agree to that, we would be in a really bad position. So just for the sake of having it documented, I think maybe.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So we'll move forward with getting something in writing from those 4 landowners, come back and talk about it in December. I'm also wondering, DTI used to have some sort of program or some sort of something about bringing roads up to standard before they would take them over.
Yep.
That might be good to look at as well if there's an opportunity there to tap into
Absolutely.
some funds potentially. So we're good with where we are on that. We'll put that on the agenda for the next
Thank you.
go round. Thank you. Okay. Xander had a little break, so now we're up to 14.7, the rural plan.
All right. Not to get involved in things I have no idea about, but just on that last conversation, I think part of the issue is that because the first part of the road is nobody knows who owns it, there's no legal right for anybody to get to the part of the road that the village owns, and so technically everybody driving on that part is trespassing, there's a number of mechanisms to get the land. It could be an expropriation, although that's kind of more extreme, working with the landowners and doing a subdivision, and I don't know if it's something you've talked about with our office at all, but we are very well versed in the provincial subdivision regulation, so we can definitely help with that as well. On to the rural plan. So the rural plan's been in effect. That was done by Dillon Consulting for a little over a year now. And I think we've found some issues with it. I think, Council, you've noted some issues as well. There's also some new provincial legislation that came in right after that bylaw was passed. They're called the Statements of Public Interest. They're regulation under the Community Planning Act. They deal with promoting efficient development of land use, focusing new development along existing infrastructure, aka public roads, and limiting, there's some other measures, but specifically gaps in the existing rural plan. One is limiting developments in flood-prone or natural hazard areas. It was surprising to get a rural plan that did not deal with coastal flooding in coastal environments such as Grand Manan. So if we do amend it, there's some things we need to bring up to the current standards, which are best planning principles and lead to efficient development. And if you're only developing off of existing roads, then you don't get some of these problems like you've got with Mill Hill right now, because who knows what happened back then. But if you're sticking to existing publicly maintained roads, those are public and they're maintained. So at least you're not going to further exacerbate an existing problem. So in looking at the plan, and we haven't really gotten too into it yet, this is just kind of our initial look. There's some changes to the zoning map, and I did bring a copy with me, which is a bigger copy. We've sent zoning maps around too, and there's also a flood hazard and future flood map, which would have some regulations associated with that. But the basic idea of what we're thinking are reduce the number and eliminate some of the land use descriptions in the rural plan. There's a lot that there's a definition for them, but they're not used at any point. Or you'll have, in certain zones, you can do an industrial use, and then you can do a tank house and a lobster pound and all these other things, which could very easily just be defined under industrial use. So it just makes it an overly complicated and a little bit unwieldy plan, that kind of over wordage. There are some just kind of like technical issues, like industrial uses aren't actually allowed in the industrial zone, which probably was never intended, but just slipped through somehow. There's the minimum lot size standards do not match the current provincial lot standards for what is needed for septic and well separation. So yes, the Department of Public Safety is approving all new septics, but they tend to say, well, if there's a land use plan in place, we're pretty happy with working within that. And so you could have a situation where you have very narrow lots, and you could run into issues with water tables and public safety issues, public health issues. So we would say bring your lot standards up to the provincial regulations on new lots in unserviced areas, so it's acre lots basically. There would be provisions for existing lots. So if you have a lot that is smaller than an acre, it doesn't mean you can't develop it, as long as you can meet those public safety standards with septics and wells. I did mention the areas for future storm surges and coastal flooding. Typically, what you do with those is it's not necessarily you can't develop there, but if you're going to develop, you need to raise the land up to a certain height. You need to have critical electric, mechanical, and all your habitable spaces need to be above that elevation. And then what will visually look like the biggest change is in the current rural plan, if a property is touching a road, the entire property becomes mixed use. And you could have theoretically a commercial use or residential use that's on some of these properties kilometers away from the public road. And that can lead to all sorts of problems. It can be a big problem for public safety in terms of firefighter access. It can create lots of new infrastructure that then in the future becomes issues. So what really the statements of public interest push for are keep that type of development fairly close to the road, within 140 meters, so you can still have a couple lots going back. And then you're also preserving the areas further away from the public roads for resource development, forestry, gravel pits, types of things that you don't want near residential development. So that's when we look at your current rural plan, those are the directions that as planners we say this is the changes that we would advise. And we have started work on some of those maps, so I'll leave them here and you can look at them, and they are online too. We sent them around. We're not even close to passing anything yet. You haven't done first reading of anything. You haven't seen any new drafts. So super, super early stages. Once you decide you have a direction you want to go in and you do want to make some changes, we'll draft something up. You'll have a chance to review it. Myself or possibly Alex will work with you to make sure that it meets your desires and goals as council. And I think really what I'm talking about here, we're not significantly changing the rural plan. We're not going to change policies, except for maybe add some ones on coastal flooding. It's just tightening it up a little bit, making it a little bit simpler to administer. There's all sorts of conditional uses in it, which are complicated, and it can just be a little bit smoother and make development a little bit easier and less complicated here. So again, we would draft something, work with council once you feel fairly good about it. Then we start going to the public. Then we can go to PAC for their views on it, and that would be it. So you do your readings, and then it would be passed, and we have a new bylaw to work with. So if there's any questions on that process or issues that you have with the rural plan or things you really like about it, I'm happy to talk about those now, or I can leave the maps. You guys can have discussions and let us know what you want to do.
Thank you. Questions or comments? We've got some members of PAC that are sitting around the table, which I'm trying not to make eye contact with them, and they're trying not to look at me. I've heard a couple things, some of this just in passing through the office after a PAC meeting, that there were some challenges. So I think if there's issues with it, we should look at it and address it, and let's go from there, if that's okay with the rest of the group. So maybe the next steps are, if you leave the maps,
Yep.
we can have a look at them informally, maybe over the next little bit.
Yep.
And maybe once you're closer with the wording, maybe that's when we come back and we have like a more longer term type of meeting, like come for lunch, and
Yep.
we will work on through
Yep,
for a
we can
little
do a
bit and go from
workshop
there.
with it.
Yep,
Yep, that'd be great.
and then go from there. Does that work for the rest of the group here? Are we gonna have to go through it line by line like we did this last version of the plan? Because
Well, so what we've done, we're not like saying here's a brand new thing. We went through the plan and I have this version. It's highlighted. It's got cross throughs and comments. So that's kind of how we start. So, do you mean specifically at third reading, do you have to read the entire thing?
No, before it got to first reading, we had like about 5 or 6 lunchtime sessions where we'd literally go line by line through the plan, and some of us, it's a little dry and crunchy, I'll put it that way.
Yeah. It's going to be up to you. It's your bylaw. You're passing it. Typically, councils are not going through line by line. That's the job you want to leave for your drafters. And, you know, it's an important document. I've never, even the ones I've worked on, there's always something in there. It's like, oh, we missed that thing. There's a typo here. We got to come back and fix it. So even when you go line by line, it's pretty dry. You don't understand it very well until you start working with it, and then you start to see some of the challenges more clearly. Between Alex and myself, we have about 15 years of rural planning experience, and we're pretty familiar with, well, we're not islanders, so we're not going to say we're pretty familiar with Grand Manan, but we've been around, and we know some of the unique challenges that are here, and we understand them, I think, fairly well. And again, we're not going to take your current plan and completely tear it apart. The policies are fine. It's just some of the technical stuff. So I don't think you'll need to go through it line by line. I think we'll present something that says, here's where we made changes. Here are the changes we made. Do you like these changes? Because these are the changes that we know work with the current provincial legislation and our planning best practices. Yeah, so I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I will be here until I'm on the 11:30 ferry tomorrow. So if anybody wants to just catch me before I go, you're welcome to. And just because I'm here, completely separate topic, I need to get some documents before I leave.
Yes,
So should I come back tomorrow once the office is open?
sure, or we can grab them for you before, are you leaving right?
I don't have to.
If
No,
you
I can
stay
stick
till we
around.
go to closed session, then we'll get them for you then.
All right, I'll do that.
Okay, sounds good, because we have one more thing before that. Perfect, thank you, by the way, because I forgot about the documents as well. So that moves us up to 17-1. Counselor Boyd, you're up.
Get Councilor Greenlaw back for that one.
All right, well, this is a fairly simple one, I guess, was we're just going to be looking to approve to pay the following invoices. 17-1, General Operating Fund, Urquhart Quality Homes Fitness Center expansion for $10,400. Jet Pro Consultants, Inc., yearly maintenance for $4,051.95. Dutchman Contracting Limited for DTI ditching for $7,408.88. Emerge, formerly Beers Neal, year end, $11,500. Morse Fisheries for tractor mower rental for $14,812. SD & Co. Limited for Fire Department for $1,928.55. Chandler Sales for Fire Department VHF for $4,445.44, a lot of fours. Michael Green Electrical Fitness Center expansion for $2,011.93. So we'll be looking for a motion to pay those funds.
I'll move that we pay those invoices from the general operating fund.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Green. So, all those in favor? Questions? Questions for those? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's passed. We'll go get the mayor.
We could do this every meeting if you guys wanted. I'm always worried I'm gonna screw the numbers up. Did you have that?
Well, there was the several fours.
Okay, so 17.2 is the general capital fund. There's an invoice from Brunswick Engineering for the airport hangar for $7,641.75.
I'll move that we pay that invoice from the general capital fund.
You heard the motion from Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. 18.1, transfer, it's a motion to transfer $422 from the gas tax bond to the gas tax bank account and close the gas tax bond. This was an account that our account manager has just had sitting with, that nothing's happened in it. It's been there forever, so.
I'll move we transfer that $422 from the gas tax bond to the gas tax bank account and close the gas tax bond.
Heard the motion from Councillor Green. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Turner. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. 18.2 is a motion to transfer $6,929.75 from the Capital Reserve Fund to the General Capital Fund.
I'll make that motion.
Heard the motion from Councillor Greenlaw. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Boyd. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. And then the two additions, the first one was to transfer $230,000, $918.79. I hope I said that correctly, from the general operating fund to the general capital fund.
I'll make that motion.
Heard the motion from Councillor Greenlaw. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Turner. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. And then the final one is to transfer $238,603.47 from the general capital fund to the airport line of credit. You heard the motion from Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Greenlaw. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next up is closed session. We have 4 items to discuss there. The first is personnel code of conduct. 19.2 is personnel, public works supervisor. 19.3 legal, it's the DTI public works contract. 19.4 is financial airport hangar update. Motion to go into closed session? Motion by Councillor Boyd. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Turner. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. I'll recall the regular council meeting back to order. We were in closed session to talk about 4 things. The first was personnel code of conduct, and we're going to refer that to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee to develop a policy. Sounds very official. 19.2 was personnel, the Public Works Supervisor position.
I move that we accept the committee's recommendation on the Public Works Supervisor.
You heard the motion from Councillor Green. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Boyd. Question? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. 19.3 was legal. It was the DTI Public Works contract, the negotiation, because we're still on a 2-year trial.
I make a motion that the Village of Grand Manan make the appropriate arrangements to draw up a contract to take over the summer and winter maintenance of our roads full-time effective November 2025.
Heard the motion from Councillor Boyd. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Toll. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. 19.4, we had an update on the airport hangar, and that is proceeding, hopefully. So with that, our next regular council meeting is here on December 2nd, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. Motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Greenlaw. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.